Welcome to this masterclass on vocal recording. Today we're going to dive into everything you need to know to be able to capture radio-ready vocals from even the most modest setup. So let's jump in. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's bust a few myths. I want to take a moment to focus on what you don't need to create and capture top-tier vocals. And it's not $1 million studio. It's not a huge mic locker and expensive gear, or any one door or plugin. So what do we need? Let's look at what we truly need to capture the most important elements in modern music. A deep understanding of key concepts that make up great recordings. Yes, that's it. As simple as that. If you understand the why behind what makes up a great recording, as well as the tools and techniques you can use to get you there, you can consistently capture high quality vocals without any fuss or unnecessary complexity. So let's dive into what we'll be learning today. We're going to walk through the Empire system. For those of you that love Star Wars, this will hopefully stick into your brain a little clearer. So what is the Empire system? Let's break it down. We'll be learning each step in the Empire system, which consists of E for environment, which is dialing in the room you're recording in, M for microphone choice for the singer, and the most direct and tight sound you can possibly create dialing in your microphone. And then we have got P for placement, so we can get the best tone from our vocals and the best placement within our room. Then we've got R for recording, where we dial in the performance and workflow to get the best possible takes from our singer. And finally, E for editing, where we compile our best takes into one master take that presents the best possible performance from our singer. This is the concept, the system that we can remember and go through every time we record, but let's now turn each of these into an actionable checklist. Real quick before we move on, you can grab our free vocal recording checklist, which you can go through every time you record to get pristine vocals without the guesswork. To get that, just click the link in the description where you can grab a bunch of other free resources to help you with your productions and mixes. So what we'll be doing is choosing our room to record in, picking the best mic for the job if you have more than one microphone, positioning our mic and getting the right distance and height from the singer, recording our takes, and comping our takes and doing any necessary cleanup, adding crossfades and removing mouth noises, etc. So let's kick off with the first part of our system with E for environment. So now let's choose our room. First of all, you want to get rid of gremlins, those sneaky little monsters that can creep up and turn a well-intentioned recording session into a mess. So what are these gremlins? They can come in and destroy your recordings, so we want to avoid them at all costs. First off, we have noise from our environment and from our room. Next, we have reflections from our walls, doors, and ceilings. And finally, we have resonances from any pockets in our room that will destroy your singer's vocal tone and create unnecessary buildup within the frequency range. So how do we avoid these gremlins? Let's take a look. We control background noise. We can turn off fans, AC, avoid hissing and rumble. We can also choose a time of day that is conducive to a quieter environment if you're on a busy street or have noise coming from another room or a neighbor. We can also check and double check our equipment quality, our microphones, our wires, USB cables, etc., to avoid any distortion, crackling, or pops from any faulty hardware that we own. So, minimizing reflections is where most recordings can fall apart, and we want to try to isolate our recorded vocal as much as possible from our room. So, first off, we want to pick a room that is naturally less reflective. So, probably not a bathroom, ideally, a lounge or bedroom will be a better choice. Somewhere where we can actually soak up as much of those reflections as possible naturally based on the room's shape and the objects within the room itself. Secondly, we want to tame the reflective surfaces in our rooms. Our walls, hardwood floors, our tile floors are going to bounce our vocals all around our room and make our recording sound undefined and messy, particularly when we try to make it stand out front and center in our song. Most often, bare surfaces are not your friend when it comes to recording vocals. Finally, we can start to tighten up your room by considering purchasing or making acoustic panels, hanging them up on your walls, using carpets or rugs on your floors and mattresses around your singer to create a makeshift vocal booth. You can also consider using a reflection filter around your microphone as well. So here are a few common solutions. So to our left, we have got acoustic panels, which you can hang on your hard walls to absorb reflections from your voice. Secondly, we've got reflection filters and isolators like the Chaotica Eyeball on the right. These do a similar job of minimizing direct reflections around the microphone to get a more isolated and direct sound from your vocalist. And finally, to our far right, we have a makeshift vocal booth using stands and acoustic blankets. You can use regular thick blankets or a large comforter, as well as prop up a mattress in a similar position to the gobo, either around the mic as pictured or behind the singer. So each of these techniques can help reduce reflections from your room. And I encourage you to try the DIY route first and consider making purchases if your room is still creating problematic reflections. But you can do a lot of the heavy lifting with some savvy DIY reflection filters and booths. So now let's talk about resonances. Simply put, depending on the shape and size of your room, certain frequencies will be more pronounced while others are going to be less pronounced while the mic is picking up your singer's vocals. We don't want that. We want to remove the room as much as possible from the equation. So removing our reflections will do the major part of the heavy lifting here, but we can take a few extra steps. So first, we can avoid corners. There will be excessive bass build up there, and we can avoid overly boomy vocals by putting our mic and our singer as far away from any corners. Secondly, we can record off center. So recording off center will help to break the symmetry of your room. It's going to reduce the intensity of reflections attacking your mic from both sides of the wall, which can also contribute to pronounced room resonances. So these are the simplest way to get a tight and direct vocal sound when dialing in your environment and room. So let's take a look at how important it is to have our room treated to the best of our ability and based on our budget and the kind of scenario that we're in, and using some form of a reflection filter if needed. So what I have got here is the same vocalist with the same proximity from the mic. We're 5 inches away from the microphone and we recorded in multiple takes. So what you're going to hear is, first off, 3 takes which were in our lounge. We recorded the vocal in our lounge with the same proximity as what we have done in our studio, and we placed the microphone in different areas. We had one in the center, we had one slightly off center, and then we had one in the corner. So let's have a listen to each of these now. So this is the middle of the room.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made. Pushing away as you make your escape. Run, little girl, run, run. Oh, you can run, but you cannot hide. Run, little girl, run, run. I'll be here for the rest of your life.
So we can hear that there's quite a lot of the room. We're getting a lot of that room sound. And we're also getting quite a lot of bleed. So it's so important as well to mitigate noise. We've got noise in between these takes, bleed from the headphones, using less than ideal headphones as well. So let's have a listen to this slightly off center take here.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made. Pushing away as you make your escape. Run, little girl, run, run. Oh, you can run, but you cannot hide. Run, little girl, run, run. I'll be here for the rest of your life.
So if we A-B that with the middle of the room,
look at the mess you've made.
It sounds a little more focused because we are out of the center. So we're getting rid of the left to right wall echoes combining into a big echoey mess and getting picked up by the microphone. So it does sound a little tighter. We've also mitigated the noise, the bleed, by having a slightly better headphone management in terms of the volume, etc.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
And in the middle of the room,
look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
So what's so interesting here is we're at the exact same proximity. So we are 5 inches away from the microphone, and yet it feels so much further away compared to our off-center take.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
Now let's listen to our corner take.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made. Pushing away as you make your escape. Run, little girl, run, run. Oh, you can run, but you cannot hide. Run, little girl, run, run. I'll be here for the rest of your life. Look at the mess.
Let's A-B that with our off-center take.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made. Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made.
So if we look at the EQ here, let's see if there's any build-up coming from the corner in the low frequencies. So this is our corner take.
Look at the mess you've made. Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made. Pushing away as you make your escape.
And then let's look at our chair take.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
So what's interesting here is we actually have more of that low mid build up in our off-center take here as opposed to our corner. And the corner is one side glass and one side wood with a door that's being shut. So it sounds like we've got a slightly better frequency response in our corner, which is normally not the case. There's normally a lot of low and low mid build up, but we're actually getting that from where we're placed in the off-center. Let's have a look at our middle of the room.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you...
So we're getting a lot of this mid-range, which has a lot of the room.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made.
So all of that is bringing out the room, whereas our off-center...
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you...
we're getting less of that and a little bit more of this low mid build up here, which is very interesting just from our placement for the mic in the room without changing how close we are. So the distance is exactly the same. So with that in mind, let's have a look at the difference between recording in an untreated room versus recording in a treated room with a reflection filter. So we've got treatment up on the walls and we have a Chaotica eyeball, a reflection filter that is getting a lot more direct signal from the vocals. Let's have a listen to how this sounds.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made. Pushing away as you make your escape. Run, little girl, run, run. Oh, you can run, but you cannot hide. Run, little girl, run, run. I'll be here for the rest of your life.
And now let's listen to our room again.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
Our off center.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made.
So what's interesting here is we have a little bit less of this kind of bright top end, but we inevitably are going to actually process these vocals. So what happens when we add, for instance, a compressor to this? Now, we don't need to worry about what the compressor is. We're just going to dial in some compression.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made. Pushing away as you make your escape. Run, little girl, run. Look at the mess you've made.
And now let's add the exact same compression settings to the middle of our room and see what that sounds like.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made. Pushing away.
So it's bringing out all of that noise. And that's why it's so important to mitigate any kind of noise as much as possible so that when inevitably you start to process, you start to add dynamics processing to it and level out the differences from the loud and softest parts, you're going to bring all of that up. And we don't have that in this recording. And it sounds...
Look at the mess you've made.
Without?
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
And then with?
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
Make sure we've gain matched it.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder. Look at the mess you've made. Look at the mess you've made.
Let's try and match this as much as possible.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made.
So this just sounds a little more controlled from a dynamic standpoint. But when we do the same to this one...
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made. Pushing away as you make your escape.
The vocal itself sounds a little more controlled, but we're just hearing all of that noise and all of that room. And if we were to do the same to this take...
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made. Pushing away as you make your escape. Run, little girl, run, run. Oh, you can run, but you cannot hide. Run, little girl, run, run. I'll be here for the rest of your life. Look at the mess you've made.
So particularly on at.
Look at the mess you've made.
We hear all of that room reflection getting picked up by our microphone. And there's really nothing we can do here. We can try to use some plugins to remove the room. And what we're going to end up having is a slightly affected vocal that has artifacts in there. So rather than us doing that and then pulling for these specialized tools, how about we just go back and do our best to just mitigate all of that and just get a nice tight recording.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
Rather than this.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
So we want to make sure that we can do as much as possible from the get-go, thinking about the end in mind. We're thinking about where we want these vocals to sit. We're most probably wanting those to be up front and center in the context of our mix. So having it tight, having mitigated extraneous background noise, room noise reflections, room resonances, tamed from the very get-go, from everything that we have spoken about so far, is going to allow you to place those in your mix in a far more effective manner than if you were to try to do this with any one of these 3 takes here. So now let's move on to microphones. Let's address microphone type. To the left, we have a dynamic microphone, which you'll be used to seeing in live performance. And to the right, we've got a condenser microphone, most commonly seen when recording studio vocals. Which should you use? Here are a few concepts that should help you decide. A dynamic microphone is more forgiving of noisier environments and a good choice for less than ideal rooms. If you have a loud, busy street that you live on and you're worried that it will get picked up in recording, you live in a noisy environment, perhaps a dynamic microphone is the way to go. It's a good choice if you have a room that has a lot of background noise and reflective surfaces you don't have much control over. So let's look at condenser microphones. Condenser microphones are often the gold standard for vocal recordings. They pick up more detail due to their higher sensitivity than dynamic microphones. They also have a wider frequency response, which will record the vocal with more clarity and precision. However, this can be less than ideal if you're in a noisy and reflective environment, as the microphone will pick up all of that good stuff in painstaking detail. So a condenser is a great choice if you're in a more controlled recording environment. So you may be wondering, which should you choose? Well, first off, consider your goals as well as your circumstances. If you have less control over your environment, perhaps a dynamic mic is the best route to go right now. If you're looking at treating your room or getting a vocal booth to record vocalists, then maybe a condenser is a more suitable choice for you. More importantly, keep it simple. Don't obsess over buying a new mic if you already have one available. Use what you have until you're at a level where you can invest more in having multiple tools. It's common to, at the very least, build up to having one dynamic microphone and one condenser to use in different scenarios. So bear that in mind. So let's do a quick A/B of how a condenser microphone sounds on the same phrase. We're at the same distance to keep this as fair an assessment as possible. And we've also removed our reflection filter from the microphone, the condenser microphone. We have a Chaotica eyeball that we often record with just to remove a little more of the room as possible. We are in a semi-treated room. We've got panels on our walls and ceilings, which definitely helps with our reflections. But sometimes, particularly in songs where there is a little more of a dynamic performance, we've got a little higher level of energy, we can get some of those reflections getting picked up in the room by the microphone. So let's take a listen to this first phrase, which is our condenser.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made. Pushing away as you make your escape. Run, little girl, run, run. Oh, you can run, but you cannot hide. Run, little girl, run, run. I'll be here for the rest of your life.
Okay, now let's take a listen to our dynamic microphone. We're in the exact same place in the room, same distance, same gain. Let's hear what this sounds like.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made. Pushing away as you make your escape. Run, little girl, run, run. Oh, you can run, but you cannot hide. Run, little girl, run, run. I'll be here for the rest of your life.
So, immediately we can hear that there is a lot less detail. So when we talk about that detail, let's have a quick A-B here of this first phrase.
Look at the mess you've made.
And then our dynamic microphone.
Look at the mess you've made.
So it feels a little less bright. It feels like it's a little duller. We're getting a lot more mid-range energy. So if we look at our EQ here,
Look at the mess you've made.
this is our dynamic microphone. And then let's have a look at our EQ on our condenser.
Look at the mess you've made.
We're getting a lot more information getting picked up here from our vocals in this region here. Whereas with our dynamic microphone, we're getting a lot more of this area here. So what's great about that is in certain scenarios, you may want that. In certain scenarios, you may want to have a lot more of that mid-range presence with less of this area here, depending on the song, depending on the project, and also depending on your environment. We are in a position here where we're able to record in such a way because we have a treated room. But if we didn't, we'd pick up a lot more of the room, a lot more noise, which will end up being problematic when it comes to us processing. So again, don't obsess over this. If you have a dynamic microphone, just use your dynamic microphone. If you have a condenser microphone, use that and use all the principles that we are outlining here to get as tight and clean a recording as possible. Now let's move on to positioning. We'll look at placement in the room as well as how height and your position in relation to the microphone affects the tone, as well as some best practices to knock out pristine vocals every time. So let's dive into 3 key concepts to dial in great mic placement. First off, we need to eat up and isolate any immediate reflection points around the singer and microphone. This is our isolation station. Secondly, we want to observe the half over rule we spoke about earlier, where we're not directly in the center of our room and are slightly further than halfway through our room lengthways. And finally, we want to remember to use a pop filter, please, so we can reduce any harsh plosive sounds on our consonants. So first off, let's tackle isolating our vocals. If the rectangle is our room and our mic and singer are placed like we've demonstrated, we need to think about removing the possible reflections represented by these arrows. Now we can look at these white lines as the reflections coming from our voice and hitting the microphone while bouncing around our space. Now, if we add some kind of absorber in the immediate reflection points, we can now destroy these reflections and stop them from being recorded alongside our vocal takes, which will result in a much tighter vocal. Now let's move on to positioning our singer. So let's dive into 3 key concepts to dial in a great mic position. First off, we're going to talk about the 5-inch rule. Then we are going to cover the proximity factor. And finally, we're going to talk about eyes for highs and chest for depth. So let's dive into the 5-inch rule. This is simply marking your minimum distance from the mic. I like to use my pop filter to stop a vocalist from getting any closer than 5 inches from the microphone. As simple as that. And then you can just move on. And this leads to the proximity factor, where the closer we get to the microphone, the more low end we get picked up and recorded by our microphone. Now, the further away we get, the area a more roomy a characteristic sound we get from our vocal. And there is a sweet spot to be had here if you don't want to have excessively boomy or excessively roomy sounding vocal recordings. And you guessed it, it's somewhere between the 5-inch rule, with recommendations sitting between 7 to 12 inches away from the mic, depending on your room and vocalist. Now, it's up to you to experiment with this and dial that in based on the particular song and the vocalist. Now let's move on to our final concept on positioning. Finally, we have got eyes for highs and chest for depth. If we want a brighter, more open capture from our singer and mic, we can use height in our favor. We can place our mic at the singer's eyes at a slight downward tilt. We can also do the opposite and place the mic directly at the singer's chest for a deeper and warmer tone. If we want a more straightforward and neutral tone without pronounced highs or lows, we can place the mic at the singer's lips. We're still observing the 5-inch rule here. So let's dive into both distance and height. So we've spoken about our immediate reflections. Now we can start to dial in how we can refine our tone and the perception of the singer's vocal tonality by dialing in these concepts. So we're going to A/B a few different proximities. So when we speak about the proximity effect that we have covered, we get more low end when we're closer to the microphone, we get less as we go further and further away, and then we start to get more airy, roomy recordings. So let's have a listen to same microphone at lip height and different distances from it, and listen to how they sound. So first off, we're 1 inch away from the microphone, so very, very close to the microphone. Let's take a listen to how it sounds.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made. Pushing away as you make your escape.
Now let's listen to 5 inches away from the microphone.
Look at the Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made.
So we're getting a little bit more of a sense of ambience versus 1 inches.
Look at the mess you've made.
But we're also getting a change in tonality. So if we look at our EQ here,
Look at the mess you've made.
pay attention to this frequency range here. And then let's look at our EQ on 5 inches.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
We're getting less of this area here. And if we listen to it again, very quickly flipping between both,
Look at the mess you've made.
it's a far more
Look at the mess you've made.
warmer tone that's favoring that low end. So if you want that in your particular recording, that's absolutely something you can experiment with and do intentionally. Let's now listen to 7 inches away from the microphone.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made. Pushing away as you make your escape.
5 inches.
Look at the mess you've made.
A little more controlled, a little more up front. 7 inches.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
A little brighter, a little airier, and a little more room. So it's slightly opening up the tonality of the vocal. Let's move on to 12 inches.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made. Pushing away as you make your escape.
So we are further back and we're getting a lot more room, and we're getting some resonances as well, where we're hearing these room resonances pop out on certain vowels.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess
On O.
you've made. Oh, what a mess you've made. Pushing away as you make
Let's find it.
mess you've made. Mess you. Oh, what a oh, what a mess. Oh, what a mess you've made. Oh, what a mess. Oh, what a mess.
Right there.
Oh, what a mess you've made. Oh, what a mess you've made. Oh, what a mess you've.
And absolutely we could go in here and do something like this, but why not fix it at the source and then just come a little bit closer to the microphone based on the room that we are recording in? Let's try 20 inches. This is as far away from the microphone as we could get.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made. Pushing away as you make your escape.
Let's say be that with 1 inches.
Look at the mess you've made. Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made.
5 inches.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
So we start to go into far more roomy ambient vocals here, where we're capturing a lot more of the environment as well as the vocal. And in these areas here, we're getting the extreme of very, very direct to a nice balance of direct without coloring the tone and making it favor that low mid energy, that low end build up. And then we've got
Look at the mess you've made.
slightly favoring a little more openness, and then we go into more room capture here. So it's worth mentioning that there's no right or wrong here. It's just simply based on your own goals. Perhaps it would be a good idea to record backing vocals or gang vocals at this proximity, but if we are trying to go for a tight and upfront lead vocal, these may not be the best options for you right here, and we might want to favor somewhere around here. But again, you need to experiment based on your own room. 12 inches may be the sweet spot. But what we've found in terms of talking about the 5-inch rule and there being some kind of sweet spot, I have found personally that anywhere between the 5 to 7 inches is a really nice balance of being up front, but also not having unnecessary build up. So with that being said, let's move on to height. Let's have an A-B of a few different heights from the microphone. So we've got lip height, we've got eye height, and we've got chest height. So let's start off with eye height.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made.
So we have got this pointed at our singer's eyes and slightly tilted downward. Let's listen to chest height. So we are angling the microphone straight on, pointing at the singer's chest.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made.
Let's go back to eye height.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made.
So it sounds a little brighter, a little more open. We're favoring a little bit more of this area here. Whereas with our chest,
look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh,
we're favoring more of this energy here. And we can even see that on our EQ if we pull that up on eye height.
look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
Getting less of this energy here and more of this energy with a little more of a pronounced area getting picked up at the top end as well. Now let's look at lip height. So straight on, again, all of these are the same proximity. We're 5 inches away from the microphone for these 3 examples here. And we are just directing the microphone capsule at lip height.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Oh, what a mess you've made.
Let's A-B that with our chest height.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
Lip height again.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
So we're getting a nice balance here between eye height and chest height. So we're getting a little bit of the body where the chest is resonating, but we're also capturing some of that top end and high mid energy around here so that we're getting a little bit more presence and air.
Look at the mess you've made. Look at the mess you've made.
And we're also getting a little bit more sibilance with our eye height. So that's something that we may want to bear in mind. If you have a overly sibilant singer or some consonants that are a little more sibilant than others in the performance, you may want to get a balance between eye height and lip height to try to mitigate some of that sibilance as well, which we're able to do here. We get a little less sibilance when we're at lip height than when we're at eye height. Pay attention to the S's. So first at lip height.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
And at eye height.
Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate. Look at the mess you've made. The silence gets louder as you ruminate.
Ever so slightly a little bit more of our attention and energy is being pulled towards those S's because of less of a balance around here. So it might be something that you might want in a particular song. It might be something that you don't want. It's just something to consider when you are setting up your recording environment and setting up for your recording session so that you are having both the technical and the emotional in mind and doing what's best, both from representing the singer's voice in the best possible light and also serving the song in the best possible light as well. So now let's move on to recording. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Everything we've spoken about, all the concepts and techniques we have covered are so that we can capture a great vocal performance that hits our listeners and has them begging for more. So let's talk about some crucial steps to get a great recording from yours or your singer's lips in any DAW. Here are the steps you can follow to keep momentum and nail a bunch of great takes. We want to get comfy, whether it's you singing or you're tracking. We want to create a great environment to start to get in the zone to perform. Next, we want to get levels, so we are recording at optimal gain and don't get any distortion, ready for processing later on at an optimal level. Next, we want to follow a workflow so we can maximize efficiency and reduce burnout while we are in the creative zone. And finally, with all those steps set up, we can focus on performance, how we're actually going to tell the story of the song through our voice. Let's touch on these in a little more detail. We want to create an inviting space to start to think about how we're going to loosen up and get creative with our vocals. Whatever works for you, whether it's colored lights, darkness, candles, room spray, a combination of all or none of these things might work for you. Experiment. This might seem unimportant, but little details like this can make or break a good, productive session. So let's move on to our next step. Get levels. This is the last hurdle in the recording process. To keep it simple, when you are looking at your audio interface, we want to keep it 90% green. A touch of yellow on the loudest point is generally okay. What you see on our interface to the left is a good sign. What you see on the right is not so good. We would want to stop and adjust our gain, bring that down so that we are in the green. Now, for those of you who want hard numbers, we want to aim anywhere between -12 and -18 dBFS at the loudest point, meaning when you're belting that final chorus at the loudest parts, we want it to look something like this. So no louder than -10 dBFS. So this is how it would look in your DAW. And if we were assuming this is the loudest part within your song, any number around this area and this kind of look on your fader, on your metering, is good to go. All right, so let's talk a little bit about gain, both in our audio interface, recording with our microphone, and then looking at it in the context of our DAW. So if we take a look now at the interface that is on screen, we can see that we have got channel 1 here, which is representing the microphone signal that I'm now speaking. And then we have this orange bar that we can now control by bringing it up and down like so. And we can also go into our software, and I'm going to do that just for the sake of demonstrating so my hand's not in the way. As we bring the gain up, you're going to see that we have more gain coming in through channel 1. So we can pull that up even further, and you can see that there's more gain, and you're going to hear my voice is going to be a lot louder. So we can now bring that back down, and this should now sound a little more stable in how loud it is. And what we want to do when we're recording is we simply want to control our input. And then we want to look at this, make sure that's in the green as much as possible. And then we want to look at our DAW and look for the magic number of -12 to -20 decibels, give or take, at the loudest point. So kind of living within that realm. So with that being said, let's dive into the DAW. So you can see that we have input 1 here, which is corresponding with input 1 here. And we're just recording our vocals. We're preparing to record our vocals. So you can see right now as I'm speaking, we're peaking a little too high. So what I can do here is just bring the gain down on my vocals, right? And now we are in a much healthier space here. We're at about minus 16 dB at the loudest point where my voice is peaking. And to save any unnecessary complexity, rather than me bringing the gain up and down in my audio interface, I have some plugins on my interface, and namely this limiter now. And I'm just bringing up the level, as it can tend to be quite quiet with a dynamic microphone, which is what I'm using. And I have just pushed that up, and I can bring that down. So I can control the level both here, or if I were to turn this off and just focus on our interface, if we switch back to our audio interface, we just bring the input up, then you can see and hear both on the interface and in Logic here as we speak, we've brought that level up. We can afford to bring a little bit more of that up, like so. And now we've got a slightly healthier level coming in. So it's as simple as that. You just want to set this to be around here at the loudest point, and make sure that on your interface, you're not seeing any red here. You're not seeing any red here, and that everything has a nice healthy amount of gain coming in. And it's really as simple as that. Now you can just arm your track and then press record. So now let's move on to the importance of following a workflow. We want to follow a workflow so we can know exactly what to do, ride the creative momentum in the room, and prevent rabbit holing. No one workflow works for everyone, but here are a few recommendations. Option 1 is to record the entire song from start to finish and punch sections in as needed. Option 2 is to record section by section and do 3 to 5 takes for each verse, pre-chorus, and chorus. Option 3 is to record softer parts like the verses and bridge together, doing 3 to 5 takes of each, and then recording all the higher parts together in the same fashion. Experiment with these. Inevitably, if you work with multiple singers, your workflow will change slightly from session to session. Now we can focus on vocal performance. We can allow our singer to dial in vocal placement and performance energy. Now, more experienced singers will have their own methods, but we can also play around with facial expressions to get a different vocal characteristic. For example, smiling will create a brighter lift in performance, and a downward sneer can help your vocals to appear more confident and aggressive. The most important part is creating an environment to explore. And if you've followed the steps so far, you are in a great spot. Now let's move on to our final step, which is editing. Now we can take all of the great work we've done in capturing a great recording and performance and put together the best work of the singer. We're going to talk through comping. Comping is simply taking the best takes from the multiple recordings you've done and choosing the best parts. It's like assembling the perfect pizza from a buffet. You've got slices from different pies, each one with something great to offer. One slice has the perfect crust, another the best cheese pull, and another has just the right amount of pepperoni. You pick and choose the best pieces from each to create the ultimate slice that satisfies every craving. Similarly, in vocal comping, you take the best parts of various takes to craft a flawless performance. Let's dive into how to comp. The process of comping is simple. Step one, we want to listen through each take one at a time. And then step two, we want to choose the best parts and compile them into one master take. Once we've done that, we want to crossfade any cuts for smooth transitions between each of the phrases. It's as simple as that. Comping is such a crucial factor in getting the most polished representation of the singer's performance and will help you to craft the tastiest vocal performance you can. So let's dive into a practical demonstration of comping. So we have got our track and then we have got our vocals that we have recorded to, and we are just going to demonstrate comping. So we've got our lead vocal, everything else has been hidden and muted for now. And we tracked verses, pre-chorus and chorus separately. So you can see we did these on separate tracks. You can do this on one track, but it's just for the visual representation of the different sections so that we can kind of see these. So in Logic, we have take folders. So automatically, if you loop around and record, it creates a take folder that you can open. And you can see here that we have multiple takes, and we've gone through and we've actually already comped this. We've taken the beginning of this part, of this section.
Ghosts of the bones pile up so you can't get closure. Haunting your mind, they're behind every waking moment.
So we just found a slightly better word here and a slightly more emotive phrase at the end. So it's worth mentioning that when we are comping, we're not simply just looking at timing and pitch, we're also thinking about the emotional delivery, and particularly the ends of words have a lot of emotion locked up there. So it is always nice to look at the ends of phrases to see if there is a better emotional delivery. And we wanted to find a really nice punchy start to the song, and this was kind of what we went for here. And the process is exactly that. You just kind of go through each section. You can loop through it like so, and
Creeping beside you, think you can keep me.
just go through each of these. So let's just do this as a demonstration.
Creeping beside you, think you can keep me.
I'm just going to loop through this section, and then I'm going to see what options we have available and start to just do the kind of best representation of this section based on the different takes and create one master take that is the best representation of the performance. Now, we've got great vocals already, so these are super usable, but let's just go through and demonstrate this.
Creeping beside you, creeping beside you, creeping beside you, think you can keep me. Creeping beside you, think you can keep me. Creeping beside you, think you can keep me.
I will want to try to make this as transparent as possible. If you are able to just go through and get one entire take that is solid, great. It's going to sound a lot more transparent. And if you want to spend more time in the recording phase, just trying to nail a few really solid takes, I would always opt for that over trying to comp, word by word. It's very rare that you're going to kind of be doing this kind of thing. But it's not uncommon. It will be based mainly around the experience of the vocalist. So from time to time, if you work with a vocalist that is a little less experienced, perhaps they have timing issues and not great performance in terms of how far they can stretch themselves from take to take, you may have to go in here and really get granular and dial in just certain words to get the best possible representation and get it to sound as polished as possible. But when we're working with experienced singers like this, you have to do way less work. So I'm just looking at a few little sections, making sure everything sounds as tight as it possibly can. But we could just go through here
Creeping beside you,
and just audition each take.
creeping beside you, creeping beside you, creeping beside you, creeping beside you. Think you can keep me, creeping beside you. Think you can keep me.
So I like the softness of this. I think we could just get a better creeping.
Creeping beside you. Think creeping beside you.
Maybe a better you as well.
Creeping beside you. Creeping beside you. Creeping beside you. Think you can keep me. 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 Creeping beside you. Think you can keep me.
And then what we would do once we're happy with this take, you can flatten it. So now we have just got the final take here, and we're going to do some cleanup. So as you can see, we've got some crossfades that by default are locked in here in Logic. But if we didn't have these, we would just go in here and manually crossfade. So we just want to make sure that there's no clicks and pops, things sound as transparent as possible. And let's use this as an example. I don't want the breaths here. So I'm just going to fade that out. Go in here and get a little bit more detailed. And you can play anywhere between 5 to 20 in terms of the crossfade size. So I opt for kind of less if we have very tight phrases, and a little more in scenarios like this. So, you know, anywhere around here is fine. Fade these in. Let's make sure there's no clicks and pops at the end and at the start.
Creeping beside you. Think you can keep me.
Just go in here and get this sounding as transparent as we can.
Keep me, 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 keep.
And that is essentially it. We just want to go through this process for the entire song. And then we will look at tidying things up. So we've already cut out some space here, so we don't need unnecessary breathing and extraneous noise in between each section. We've done that, we've cut that out, we've faded everything. We could even just go in a little bit more there. And now what I'm hearing is some mouth clicks. So there's a few ways you can kind of combat this. You can go in here and try and find these in the waveform and then cut them out or fade them. I'm going to use a specific tool here, which is RX Mouth Declick. And I'm just going to bring the sensitivity up, which is how many clicks are going to get picked up and attenuated, brought down, eradicated, removed from the waveform. And we'll output the clicks only just so you can hear the clicks. So just those little mouth clicks. We've got 14 clicks that have been repaired here. and it's just going to tighten things up. And in this particular genre, we don't want any of that. If you're working in a more alternative indie, less polished kind of style, you may want to just keep these in. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a very natural thing that comes with having a mouth and being a singer. But in my own personal workflow, I like to attenuate these as much as possible, just so that there's not any distraction for the listener. So let's A/B this. Let's turn our declick on and have a listen.
Creeping beside you. Think you can keep me.
And then let's turn it off.
Creeping beside you. Think you can keep me.
So we can just hear these little clicks that are living around some of the words. And it's just tightening that up a little bit. So I would go through like I have done for the rest of the song. And you can see that we open our comp folders and we have chosen our takes like so for each section. And then what I would go ahead and do is flatten all of these. And then we can put this all into one take. So if we move that up, unless there is overlap, which sometimes is the case with certain songs and phrases, we can just copy all of this over here. And as you can see, we've got some overlap here. So in this instance, we can have these two tracks, get rid of any dead space, and really just start to tidy everything up. And in some instances, like you've just seen, we just want to drag the beginning of the phrase we've comped so that we don't have kind of strange breaths here.
Creeping. Escape. Run it over.
So that doesn't actually sound too bad, but let's have a listen to how this sounds.
Escape. Run it or go run, run. Escape. Run it or go.
So we're just trying to keep things as transparent and natural sounding as possible. We don't want this to sound heavily edited, although in some ways it is.
As you ruminate, oh what a mess you've made. Choice again. Look at the mess you've.
Just crossfade that. So we're just making sure that we're going through everything with a fine-tooth comb. Everything is crossfaded, everything is faded. We've got any gaps with unnecessary noise cut out. And then, of course, we would go through and listen to the entire thing. I personally like to do it in solo, just to kind of catch any mouth clicks, any pops, any crackles, anything that has happened in the editing phase. Maybe there's a breath that's been faded a little bit funny, or we've got two breaths from one take half faded, and that can create a kind of weird effect. So just to kind of catch out anything like that, make things sound as transparent, as natural, as clean as possible, like it was all recorded in one take. That's kind of the whole goal here. We want to present this as one performance, and we want things to sound as cohesive as possible. And that would be it. We have gone through, we've picked the best takes, we've then flattened it, we've crossfaded, we've gotten rid of any gaps, any unnecessary spaces that have noise in, and then we have just gotten rid of some of our mouth clicks and mouth noises. We've tried to put everything into one master take. Where there are overlaps, we just have another take here, and then we would just call this lead Vox 1. And we can go one step further here if we want to bounce this in place. We've now got a nice clean take here. And now we are ready to move on and do any further processing in the editing phase. So any tuning, any timing issues that we can pocket the vocals and make them fit more in the groove of the song. And then we're ready for mixing. So we can start to approach processing these vocals. And this is a nice way to kind of finalize the comping section to have a nice clean waveform where there are no cuts, and we can just see the entire vocal just as one track, or in this instance 2 tracks, because of this slight overlap here. So that's it, that's comping. We can now move on to the next phase. So to recap, we can use the Empire system and each of the concepts we discussed to tighten up our vocal recording at every angle, covering our room, our microphone, our positioning, our recording, and comping. So now you're ready to move into the tuning and time aligning phase before going into vocal mixing. So I encourage you to memorize this system and internalize it. Once you go through this process a handful of times, you'll start to have this down to a science. That's it for this masterclass. Happy vocal recording.